Welcome to the show. It's true. It is Toward Anarchy. I am your host, Michael Storm. Thank you so much for joining me. I truly appreciate it. It is Sunday. It's May 17th. It's a beautiful day in the middle of America, and I'm glad that I appreciate the fact that you are here and you're going to spend some time with me. And it's a special day. It's always a special day when Sunday rolls around because I get to do this. I get to put on my little performance here and talk to the people that I like to talk to and talk about the things I like to talk about. But today is a little bit special because there's no place like home, and I'm going home in a whole lot of ways today. My conversation today will be with a longtime friend of mine, really preteen, almost as long as I've known my quote-unquote best friend, right around the same time as when we met. We'll catch up, and we'll talk about our mutual and exclusive blah 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 existences. You just do that thing where we catch up a little bit, but then this will invariably lead to a conversation about the Wizard of Oz, because this is one of the things that, as people who grew up together, childhood friends, both of us pushing the age of 50 now, who learned about these things and knew about these things separately from each other while still being friends, and then came back together closer, where proximity literally, and were able to meet back up and reconnect and share the fact that we knew about these things and how we found out about them and what they meant to our understanding of the world. So, and it's interesting this week because what I've done is, I don't always do this, but oftentimes the subject will lend itself to some great keywords, something that will attract attention. And in this case, just the Wizard of Oz itself attracts attention. And so all I did was I did the social media thing, as I always do, to share with the people who follow myself and who follow the show and some of the other pages that I'm connected to, things like that across the social media. And I spent just a little bit of money, because that's all it takes to boost a post. If you're familiar with the concept in the social media, particularly Facebook, you have the option to boost a post, and it makes it more like an advertisement. It's a paid advertisement, basically. And so every once in a while I do that. Usually I do it with toys. I sell toys, collectible figures, things like that. You've heard me talk about my collection of toys that's in and around the studio. And if you watch videos, sometimes you can see there's a handful of them in the background, stuff like that. You can see some of my favorite comic books hanging in the background as well. So you get the idea that I'm into that sort of thing. So I'll spend some money on some advertising to when I'm selling some of my toys. And I'll sometimes do it for posts for the show and things like that, just to try and attract a little bit of extra attention. So I did that this week, and I did it using the words The Wizard of Oz. And while this may not seem like a huge, big old special conversation to a lot of people to talk about The Wizard of Oz, particularly in this way, to others it is, because they've never heard this before. They've never heard the political argument, the political conversation about the speculation about what the Wizard of Oz meant at the time and what Frank L. Baum was trying to say through analogy, through telling a story, one of the earliest American fantasy stories of its type, and how it reflected the politics at the time and things that were happening. And so this conversation that we'll have today is about the Wizard of Oz, and it's about that. It's about the Wizard of Ounces, if you haven't heard that term. And Bryon and I will have this conversation coming up in about 25 minutes or so. And we'll talk about many other things, and that's what we do. And so I have to take the opportunity while I have you here, some new listeners, and there's always somebody new tuning in. That's what's great. And there's always, even new people from the network, people who listen to other shows on the network who are just finding the show for the first time, which I think is just fascinating. It's just amazing how happening every single day, and just the people reaching out. And it's something that I have to work on. One of these conversations we're going to have to continue a little bit later. And now that we're out of this quarantine thing, I've been able to try to get back in touch with somebody who I wanted to be on the show before all this started. And I didn't know really how to reach him without going to him physically. And so I'm able to do that now. And I've reached out again, and I'm going to have one of the local ministers come on the show, and we're going to have a conversation about the compatibility between anarchy and Christianity, because I've never been that guy, or at least I haven't been for a long, long time. It's been many, many years since I gave any real consideration of Christianity or religion as being anything more than an individual thing. It's been a long time since I made some poor girl cry, telling her that religion's responsible for more murders and death than anything else in the world. And it's not. I don't know that that's really true. I think the state, the religion of the state, is probably, and that was a long time ago. And so I stopped doing things like that after I did that to that poor girl, and I saw the way she responded to it, and I thought, well, what the hell is the point of my doing that? Why did I do that? To what end? I certainly didn't make any friends there in that conversation that night, certainly not with her. And I certainly didn't make her feel better. I didn't make her change her mind or abuse, and I wasn't trying to get her to change her mind or abuse. It was, it's just one of those things that sometimes when you're not thinking. And this was 20 years ago, at least, I guess now, thinking back, trying to do the math on it. I have that problem all the time. I was trying to do that with my guest here, thinking about, when did we, exactly how old were we when we first met? And I know it's right around the time we were sort of preteen, teen, 12, 13 years old. It's been that long, with 30 plus years. And then I'm thinking about, all right, well, when did he go off to Vegas to run the cleaning business? Would that be around 2000-ish? I'm just trying to place all these different dates and everything, and try to remember exactly when it was. But partly in trying to remember exactly how long it is that I've known about this, the political implications of the story of the Wizard of Oz. Because I haven't run into that many people in my life that do. I mean, it's much easier for me to do it now when I surround myself with people who want to have conversations about ending the Federal Reserve, things like that, because it's all tied in there. It's all tied into our money. It's there's all these different aspects of the politics. Again, at the time, that still reflect today, and that's what it's great about. And I remember it was 1996 when Bill Still released The Money Masters, the film The Money Masters. You look it up, The Money Masters documentary. It's by Bill Still, and that's another guest. He's not easy to reach. I mean, he's out there, but he doesn't do the social media like we do the social media. He's on there, but he's not easy to access. Again, gatekeepers and things like that. So I want to have him on the show to have a conversation about his movie that he's done, The Money Masters in particular, and how it's changed over the years, and some of the things that he's made, some of the changes he's made to the movies, and some of the things that he's reinforced and solidified in his knowledge over the time since 1996. But I didn't see The Money Masters that soon, so I don't think it's been that long. So I'm trying to figure out these timeline things. But with the new folks that are sort of tuning in and maybe here, even though they saw the name of the show, the Toward Anarchy, they're tuning in because they're fans of the network, or because they saw the advertisement across the social media and they wanted to hear the conversation about the Wizard of Oz. Maybe they're curious about it. Maybe they've never heard it before. I'll tell you what we do here. It's really simple. I do this. I mean, I do exactly what I'm doing now. I just sort of talk about what's going on in my life and the things that are interesting me. And I bookend a conversation with my own sort of ramblings and talk about pop culture things. I talk about my Legos and my comic books, and I talk about the things that I'm watching on YouTube and what Blu-ray I just rented at the Red Box and things like that. But then, like I said, that's the bookend, and then in the middle there is a conversation that I have with just somebody I know sometimes, somebody that is popular, somebody that is a presidential candidate, whoever it is, somebody that's a rock star. It's been an interesting life. Let me tell you, I've been doing this thing, the DJ thing, this talk and radio thing for a long, long time, 20 plus years, and interviewed some interesting and fun people and talked to some people over the time. And that's what this is. It's more of a conversation. I'm not, I don't have any sort of pre-programmed ideas about where the conversation is going necessarily. I set up a little bit of framework. I've been wanting to get Bryon on the show for a little while. He, as being a good friend of mine, it's been a couple of days since the last time we caught up, and so it would be real nice to get him in and do like I've done in other situations, talk to my father and my brother. And while those may not sound like particularly interesting conversations on the face, they have that human aspect, of course. There's there's a lot to that. I don't know my brother and my father very well. I've only known them for maybe a decade. I'm almost 50. So that says a lot about what those conversations could be. But then my father also has worked in Hollywood for a number of decades, 30, 40 years, something like that he's been out there almost 40 years, I guess. And he's been working in Hollywood. And so that was a great conversation. And my brother, he worked for the Park Service, and he's into conservation, and he has his own business now where he helps businesses, Zeroscape and things like that, where they're conserving their property and taking care of the land around them and the environment around them. So these are bigger conversations than maybe they sound like on the surface. And it was the same with Bryon, because I knew that Bryon and I, we've always had this connection. I actually know his brother longer, not much longer, a very short period of time longer, but because his older brother was my age. Actually, his older brother is a little bit older and had failed, and so it was held back, and so he was in my grade. So he's actually a little bit older, and I shouldn't have necessarily met him, except that we were in band together, a marching band, jazz band, all these different things. He plays drums, an amazing drummer with some addiction problems, unfortunately, over his lifetime. He's run into some issues. But, I met Bryon through Derek, and Bryon and I have been friends all these years, just like Derek and I have. And one of the things about it was really great. It was just this neat idea that we could come to such similar conclusions about life and attitude about life and about politics and about our understanding of money in the world, and so separately, when so few necessarily come to those understandings at all ever anyway. So it's a really neat connection that we have on that part, as well as just being sort of lifelong friends. So go to towardanarchy.com. This is the big thing that you have to do. This is on you. I put all the work together. I did all the stuff. I paid for the website. I put the words up there and put them in some semblance of order so that they made sense, and have taken a year's time now to tweak and twist and turn the keywords and the language and everything that's in the background, as well as what you can see when you go to towardanarchy.com, to get it to show up first on Google and things like that. So I'm doing all of that. All I need you to do is share. That's it. You don't even have to like. You don't even have to subscribe or follow. But share. You have to share. Just share the link. Share the link for the page for the show every day. If you go to towardanarchy.com, if you're with me in real time, you'll see that right there on the front page, it says May 17th, Bryon Linzie, close childhood friend, is my guest. We catch up on, and that means a discussion that includes our understanding of the Strawman, the Tin Man, the Wizard of Oz, and also Facebook names 20-person Supreme Court, quote unquote, for content moderation and disputes. There's a link there. Well, we get to the link. Earn it bill is yet another attempt by government to control internet speech, and I didn't know if you had heard about that. But also up there on that front page, there's the email list, and I will get to that. I will do something with that soon. I only just started it, and plenty of people have signed up for it. I haven't sent anything out yet. I will. I want to make it good, though. I want to make it count. And then there's, right on the front pages, we talk about what happened last week, a great conversation with Joy Flores about decentralizing the food supply chain and this startup, this application that he's working on to prove the concept and really get people already doing the bigger thing, and then sort of drop the ball on them. Hey, you know what you're doing? You're living the anarchy that we always talk about. You're doing what we talk about here on this show being the reality that is our existence, that we live in anarchy every second of every day because we make all these decisions and we do everything that we do and influence the world around us without any need for or consideration of the opinion of authority. That's it. It's really that simple. So no big surprise there for those of you who came despite the name when you saw that there was going to be this conversation about the Wizard of Oz, maybe something that you were interested in. And hopefully you'll make the share. That's what you do. TowardAnarchy.com, the shares. And then it's May 17th. If you're not with me in real time, just click on the archive. Anybody who's with me from week to week, you might notice some changes. I've always had a little bit of a formatting problem with trying to get the quote, if it wasn't a long enough quote, to be big enough on smaller screens, even though I'm using a cascading style sheet for the nerds out there who know what I'm talking about. It's supposed to provide a consistent place and format for laying out the fonts the way you see them on the screen, and it should appear the same on every device, theoretically, but they don't, especially on the smaller ones like your phones. And it's been a long time I've been building websites to be able to fit on the smaller devices like this, and naturally, without having to build separate pages or to call up anything different. And so you might notice some changes, me just tweaking with some things. But the more important thing that you will see is I shared a link there. It's an introduction to the Wizard of Ounces, the Wizard of OZ, because I didn't want you to start off in some of the deeper ends of it. And Bryon, we'll hit on some of those other areas of the conversation that are a little bit, they're not as important as the main ideas of the Strawman, the Tin Man, the Wizard of Oz, the Yellow Brick Road, the Silver Slippers. Facebook names 20-person Supreme Court content moderation and disputes. That link is up there. The Earn It Bill link is up there as well. And these are, information, homeworks, and things to catch you up. Maybe you hadn't heard about them. And yet we have what purports to or professes or is claimed to be a contract, the Constitution, but which nobody ever signed, sealed, delivered, witnessed, or acknowledged. That's Lysander Spooner, and I left a whole bunch out there because I only wanted to hit on the main points of that, as I normally would. The Constitution is not a contract. It's a single-party document. Contract by default is a multi-party document conferring benefit from one to another or both, and it's spelled out in very specific terms, and it also spells out penalties. The Constitution does none of those things, is none of those things. That's not what the Constitution is, and he's not saying that. He's saying that others purport it to be. And as always, I'm not – you have to make your decisions about Spooner. When it comes to his economics, I don't think he's – too great, we got to go into a break. We're going to come back and we'll talk some more about what's coming up here on the show. Toward Anarchy. TowardAnarchy.com. That's the place to go. Make sure that if you're listening in any of the myriad of places that you can catch the show, if you're listening live, if you're a fan of the network and you've never done so, and you can, support the network, help out the network. Reach out to John and tell him, you heard this Toward Anarchy show and this Michael Storm guy, and he thought, hey, you know what, I'm going to support the network because that keeps the show going. But if you're listening to us on iTunes or iHeartRadio or Spotify or Stitcher or TuneIn or Unplay or whatever your favorite streaming source is, most of the, like the Play Store, your phone, if you just pull up your phone, I think almost all of them now will do it and just press the microphone to search and just tell it to play Toward Anarchy podcast, or just any combination of Toward Anarchy podcast. Pull that up, whether it's through Google or whether it's through your iPhone or whatever it is. It should pull it up for you. Your digital assistant should pull it straight up for you. And if we're not on your favorite streaming service, send me a email. It's easy to do. Just go to the towardanarchy.com, go to the contact page. That's where you can find the fans. Set up a chat room there. You can reach out and hang out with other people who are fans of the network and fans of the show, who come and hang out during the live shows for almost all of them. I believe that almost every show on the network has one of these little chat rooms like that. And it's really great. It's distracting for me because I want to get into the conversations and talk with everybody. But there's also the Twitter link, and there's there's a Facebook contact, and there's the email contact there. That's all the ways to reach out. That's why it's called the contact page, I guess. You see, it seems to make sense, but then again, you talk about something that makes sense to you sometimes, and other people are shaking their head. I don't understand that. I've never heard that before. And that's kind of the conversation that will be happening today. My guest, Bryon Linzie, he's here. He'll be joining the conversation after the next break here in just about 3 or 4 minutes. But we're going to, we'll catch up on our childhood friendship, and then we'll end up having this discussion, as promised, about the Wizard of Oz, because it's one of these things that binds us amongst many other things our entire life. The fact that we grew up in the same town and have all the same friends and a lot of the same memories of the world that we live in. So we'll talk about all that too as well. And then I have, as always, some links up there for you. The Facebook names, the 20-person Supreme Court for content. Maybe we'll talk about that a little later in the show. I had some other things that I thought would be more fun to talk about than necessarily those. That's why I provide the links, so I don't necessarily have to talk about them. The Earn It bill, and just another attempt by government to control internet speech. I shared another meme. It's uncredited. That's one of the things you'll notice, that I try to get in a credit for the people who create this stuff, like the Spooner quote. There's a link there to find out about Spooner. I was talking about just before we went into the break right there. Then on the economics, we're way far apart, and this is one of these conversations that we have here over and over again about the labels being important. Anarchy doesn't answer all these questions. Economics, social issues, beyond letting you, the individual, decide those things for yourself and not having someone else force those things on you. And so I give you the link so you can do your own research and find out about these people. And I needed to do that. I've needed to do it for a while with the images that I share, but oftentimes they end up being like this one. They're uncredited. I have no idea where they come from. It's just some guy in a box giving you a thumbs up, and he says, I lost my business, I lost my 401k, I lost my house and car, but I didn't get COVID-19. And, oh man, did I just ruin that? Yeah, I did. I might have made it the whole show without talking about that thing at all if I hadn't actually done. Boy, I shouldn't have been thinking about that in advance. You could have actually had 2 hours of your life where that conversation didn't come up. We'll see if maybe we can get past it again. That might be hard to do. Listen, I need to light my cigar. We're about ready to go into a break here. And when we come back, we're going to have a conversation with Bryon Linzie. And if you want to follow along, as always, however you're listening, if you're listening now, you're listening in the future, just go to towardanarchy.com. From there, everything is possible. You're only a matter of degrees of separation, a couple of clicks from all the information you might need or ever want, at least about this show anyway. It may lack some information about the rest of the world. The archive button, just click on that. It's right up there at the top under the big banner that says Toward Anarchy. And it's really easy to navigate through. And I've tried to make it so that because it's not database driven. It's all raw links, some nerd stuff for you that makes it so, well, I win that battle with Google and take over those keywords. Hey, that conversation with Bryon Linzie is coming up next. We're going to talk about the Wizard of Ounces and other things on Toward Anarchy. TowardAnarchy.com, that's the place to be. If you are with me in real time, you'll see right there on the front page, May 17th, Bryon Linzie. Otherwise, get into the archive there, and you'll find it. And you will see that I left an introduction to the Wizard there, an introduction to the Wizard of Ounces, and I thought that was a good place to start, because there's some other things that you find going down this particular golden road that could confuse the issues that are at the core of whether or not Frank L. Baum has left us this message through his writing. The series, the entire series of the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and the entire series of books. And that's not the end goal of the conversation here today, but I've invited my friend Bryon Linzie, childhood friend, many years. Couldn't even figure out how many it was. It was so many. I didn't want to think about how many years it was. And so it's another great conversation that we're going to have. So it's a real pleasure to bring my friend Bryon into the show and just get to catch up with you. It's been a little while since we talked, Bryon. Gosh, I can't even remember the last time we had a long conversation. We always have sort of little short exchanges here and there. Did you read this story? Had you seen this? Had you heard about that? But it's been a little while since we had a conversation, so it's good to get to talk to you again, man.
Yeah, definitely.
How you been?
How's sure?
Yeah, I tried to think about sort of how long or when. I don't know if it's an age thing or if it's just I've had a lifelong aversion to time. Time and I don't get along.
Oh yeah, well me and time. I don't pay attention to it. Heck, I even missed my daughter's birthday actually a couple days ago.
Oh no!
Forgot what day it was. Self-employed, and so
right. You don't necessarily follow a calendar. So I understand it. Right now, everybody's kind of doing that, right?
Yeah, a lot more people are for sure. But with this recent economic climate, it's harder and harder for people to do that, and just really been difficult to get materials even to keep my business running.
Oh yeah,
because all the places I shop at are all shut down. So
right, you can still get stuff online, but that's not as easy, really.
Well, yeah, and it's some of the places that do shipping and stuff like that have even cut down on shipping from a lot of the places where I get my materials from, like China and stuff like that. So.
This is true. I tell you, I have probably $50 worth of stuff coming out of China right now that I've been waiting for weeks, and because it all happened right around this time, and it's terrible because there's other things that I need right now, and that like the video camera. I just added a new video camera to the studio here, and I don't know if you've been out. I don't know what it's like there in Denver. But, there are no video cameras on the shelves in any of the stores around here because of the fact that everybody, is sequestered at home. Everybody went out and bought up all of the video cameras, all the printers. And then, of course, because of the glut in the fact that they're not shipping stuff, and they're not producing stuff, these things aren't actually being replenished on the shelves. So the shelves are empty in a lot of other places, not just the meat department right now.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things I've been talking with my accountant friend in Massachusetts, just the economic reset that I saw coming a while back. And, and what I was talking to him about is how, we've seen minimum wage jump to almost $15 an hour, almost nationwide. And a lot of companies haven't been able to compensate their profit margins for doing that. They're paying out higher wages, but they're not bringing in more money, but their products still bringing in the same. So their profit margins are shrinking. And all these large corporations are really seeing that hit, so, and that's what I think this is all about, is just a major reset. They're creating shortages now, and I saw that coming. And what's going to happen from the shortages is now that when they slowly start releasing stuff, that you're going to see a cost and price on everything across the board, cost of goods for everything. And that's going to help compensate for these employers having to pay out the higher minimum wages. But now we're stuck in a society where we're going to be paying higher prices for everything. You know, your $5 a gallon of milk is going to be $8 a gallon. You know, your eggs are going to be $5-6 a carton, you know.
Oh, yeah, it's hard to predict exactly where the prices will go. I mean, I guess if you spend enough time
it really is.
looking into predicting,
throwing those out there as example.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I was getting at. That it's not a prediction of what will happen. It's just a generalization of what is absolutely happening.
Exactly.
No question about it. Yeah, and that's what's on the horizon is a complete market-wide shift, and then you have to worry about, well, when certain industries fail to provide, and I'm not even talking about core important stuff, but we could talk about meat. That seems to be the big one right now. Is the meat market seems to be sort of shut down, and depending on who you ask, it's with or without reason, but it's causing some shortages in the market. And so what happens then is if you're not able to, as a corporation, come in and support the wages and the people be able to buy your product at the new higher prices, all of a sudden you start to have bailing companies, and then you have government come in, or you have larger corporations that are already much more likely to be tied up in bed with government come in and take up these smaller businesses. And the longer we're on these
for pennies on the dollar,
yeah. It's a pretty typical play in business, right? I mean,
and it's just the larger corporations trying to monopolize all the smaller corporations into the larger corporation.
Yeah, I mean, it tends that way naturally anyway. That's one of the things that's where you have to try to talk to some people about their understanding of economics. That's the way the markets, free markets, open markets tend anyway. The best, the cream of the crop, rise to the top. And the way they stay there is by being the best. They have to do pretty much everything right. You really see that exposed now because of so-called socially conscious businesses. That's a huge thing now. And if you can somehow, if you're a startup or something like that, you're looking to start a new business, if you can somehow make a social, more than just a social commentary, if you can actually make a social contribution, help clean up the planet, help give socks to third world people who don't have stocks, whatever it is, if you can do that in framing your business, you're so much more likely these days to get an investment. And that's natural free market doing that. That's not a manipulation of the market. That's people wanting to consciously affect their environment better when they're producing these goods and giving out providing the services that they provide. It's entirely natural.
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
but I mean, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to ask about this is an economic conversation. It always is with us, right?
Yeah, usually, yeah.
Well, because
it turns out that way.
Yeah, because we have an understanding of money and we don't care about politics, so.
Right.
It stands to reason that we would talk about it, and you run your own business, so you understand like having to, manage costs and things like that to be able to bring in the stuff that you need, the jewels in the case of some of the stuff that you were showing me recently, but the metals and the leather and all the different tools and crafts and things that you're creating. To bring these things in, what it costs to bring them in, and how much time it takes to create one, and how much you've spent the years doing that. So I think you have a pretty good grasp of it. But it's grounded in this this bigger understanding of where our money comes from and what it is and how it means. And that's why I kind of framed our conversation to anybody else that would want to tune in and listen to this conversation about the Wizard of Oz. What?
Because it definitely pertains to that.
When did you first hear this story?
An allegorical about money and where it comes from. So yeah.
Well, when did you first hear this story? That was kind of what I was trying to remember the last couple of days. When I first heard it, it's been a long time.
It must have been at least 15 years ago.
Oh gosh, yes, because we've been talking about it together for that long, and I knew about it before then. And of course, you must have come to it at least at that time, if not sometime before that, when we came together to talk about it. So,
yeah.
Where did you find it? Where did you find it?
Well, I found it in a book from it was basically on becoming a secured party creditor, becoming your own creditor, and just covered
what they called
a
the redemption manual, right? That's what it was.
Yeah, exactly. It was a redemption manual. Can't remember. I think it was the American Press or something like that produced it. It was a culmination of several authors, so no one name was on it specifically. So,
well, and it was sort of a gathering of information. It wasn't really necessarily a book. It wasn't like you could necessarily open it up from page one and just sort of read to the last page. I mean, you could, but it wasn't necessarily meant to be used like that. It was more meant to be like a print version of the internet. It was kind of what it was meant to be like, because a lot of the information was taken from the internet. So that was one of the things I was trying to remember. It was easier back then, 15, 20 years ago, when we first discovered this stuff, to find some of the other information about it. It was really easy for me today. In fact, I shared a link there, towardanarchy.com, for anybody who's listening in, May 17th. There's a link there that says an introduction to the Wizard of Ounces. And I thought this would be a great one, because this is just a Wikipedia. It just gives an idea about the people who've been talking about this and how long they've been talking. This isn't a modern day conspiracy thing, although there's all that tied up into it. It's not a modern day conspiracy thing. This is something that's been going on for more than 100 years. People have been talking about the sort of political allegory, metaphor, whatever it is that exists for the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Yes, exactly. Because, I mean, the book itself was released in 1900, and people have been discussing it since then. So,
Yeah, it was right away. Right away, they jumped on it. Yeah.
And then when the movie was released, the music in the film was political as well, and that's why they cut the music out about halfway through, and then there's nothing but like chase music, and there's no more lyrics to anything.
All of a sudden, it changes, and the characters in the books, they're supposed to look like political people of the time. There's there's nothing new about this, and that was one of the things that I just wanted to clarify with some people that might be skeptical of the questions that this can lead you down, the path that it can lead you down. Is some of the things that you can end up talking about. Is that this is nothing new. People they've had this understanding of what this story and what it meant for a long time.
Yeah.
And it actually speaks to the fact that people have forgotten what money is, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. And a lot of people, they chase money like it's actual wealth when it's an actual representation of debt. And it even tells you that in the story, and because there's nothing that backs the money up except for your faith. And because there's no physical substance to back it, that means your faith is worth as much as that bill, so.
Well, there's a whole.
It's just when I read it in a financial dictionary, I looked up the term a note in a financial dictionary, and it tells you that basically any kind of a note printed by a bank or any other institution thereof is considered an IOU or a check.
Yeah, it's a promissory note.
A written check, yeah. Exactly.
It's a promise. It's a promise that you, the individual,
pay later on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So,
but that was by the individual or by the institution.
Yeah. So we just basically pay these debts with debts, which is illegal, and it's not supposed to be a common business practice, but we accept it, and because nobody actually really knows what money is. Everybody just calls money the thing in our pocket that we can go take out and buy whatever we need. But yes, we're getting what we need, but we don't necessarily pay for it. We're just trading that debt to somebody else for them to use it for something else. So it's like pay off another debt to, so, and this is where our national debt comes in, and that's why it continuously grows, is because every time the Federal Reserve Bank prints money or puts more notes out there, they attach interest to it, and it just puts us deeper and deeper in debt. So
right, it's a debt instrument, and they never print enough. You can never. It's impossible to ever print enough to cover the debt. You can't pay the debt with the thing that you have to pay debt with. These green bills.
Well, because there's not enough money printed to cover the interest rate that's attached to it. You can take every printed dollar bill and give it back to the Federal Reserve Bank, but we're still going to be in debt because of the interest.
You still owe the interest
attached to it. Exactly. So how do they collect the interest? They take the land, they take the air rights, the mineral rights, the water rights, and but
they take more than that, don't they? That was what they were taking up to that point,
so
and then
now,
this was part of the story.
Now they've got past that point where they've already owned all the air rights, mineral rights, water rights, land rights, everything. So now they tax everybody.
Oh, we have to go to a break here, Bryon. Hold that thought. We'll come back and we'll get into taxation, and we'll get into what they use as collateral at that point and what part of the story is when we come back here on Toward Anarchy. Welcome back to the show. Go to towardanarchy.com. That's the easiest way to do this thing. It's the point where everything begins and ends, at least for this show, because there is where you find me. You can reach me. You can reach the show. You can reach my guests if they want to be reached. And you can find the show today, May 17th, in the archive there. If you're not listening live right now, you'll see Bryon Linzie. He's a close childhood friend of mine. And we're having this fun little conversation that we always do. We're talking about economics and money and politics and just all the things that a couple of guys who know each other well and have spent many hours bouncing different ideas off each other and, that can talk about civilly. Because it brings me, just before we went to the break, we're talking about the lack of understanding of money and how it leads to where we are now, of people being taxed and literally everything about them, their health, their wealth, their physical being taxed to pay for the government. I had this argument this week. It wasn't even a conversation; it was an argument, because there's a real argument. But it wasn't it wasn't a blow up like people were fighting or anything. But you get these people that in real life, it's one thing to have these conversations all the time across Facebook and the social media, where the people respond to you a certain way, where you'll state a fact or a truth, and they will say you're full of it, and then they will gaslight you, and they will gesticulate and sort of go a little bit crazy. I do it here. You can't see. Well, if you watch the videos, when we shoot some of them, you can see me. I'll be waving my hands around and talking as I'm going along. But at somebody, doing it at you, right in your face like this, and then telling you that they don't do that to you, and telling you that you're mean and you're angry and that you're violent, while they're red in the face and screaming at you and hollering. It's just like, can we go back to what started the conversation? The conversation, this is what's sad about it, was literally a conversation with guys telling me about how he's how he understands money, because he plays penny stocks, ultimately is what it is. But then, and he has a business degree, and he keeps waving it in front of me, talking about his business degree. And I asked him a simple question, ultimately. and that was, what's the difference between money and currency? And he told me, he gave me the example that Bitcoin was a currency and that the dollar was a money. And I told him that he was fundamentally wrong, and that by definition, both of those things are currency, that neither of those things are money by definition. And he couldn't give that to me. And when I challenged him with that, he said, who runs the Federal Reserve? Who's the head of the Federal Reserve? You're talking about the Federal Reserve, and it's a private bank, and it's a criminal enterprise of gangsters, banksters, and politicians stealing the wealth from the American people. Who's the head of it? And I said, are you kidding me? All right, that kills off that short little segment. We'll come back and we'll jump back into the greater conversation here with Bryon Linzie. We're talking about the Strawman, the Tin Man, the Wizard of Oz when we get back here on Toward Anarchy. All right, we're off into hour number 2. It is Sunday. It's May 17th. If you go to towardanarchy.com, that's the date you're looking for. You'll see I've been talking with Bryon Linzie, and we're talking about the Wizard of Oz and the Straw Man and the Tin Man. We'll have to spell a couple of those things out for people who don't actually know what those things are here in a minute. But next week, coming up on the show, another great friend of mine. Haven't known him quite as long as I've known Bryon, but we've had some amazing experiences together on the streets, dodging cops on motorcycles and pepper balls, and that'll be just one of the stories that we talk about next week when Johnny Hurley joins the show. And it's another one of these fantastic conversations that I get to have for myself, and you just get to listen in. Bryon, you were talking about the taxation thing. And I wanted to get to sort of the point of the straw man and the tin man, and how and now the individual, the person is supposed to be the collateral for the banks. And
see, now the collateral is our labor and everything that we do to pay to live. So and that's one of the things that I bring up to people all the time is like, why do you feel it's okay to pay somebody else, some faceless entity, for the right or to even exist?
Because you do, yeah.
Because you do, and everybody does, and nobody even thinks about it, but that's what we're all doing.
Nobody ever questions it, and what happens is that we get abused. The people get abused. We're the ones that pay for it. We pay for it literally with our lives and our health and our wealth. When one of them makes a mistake and they never pay for it, and that was this argument that I had this week. That was the gist of the conversation. It's like, well, you're sitting here telling me that you understand that our banking system is messed up, that they make our money out of thin air. Well, everybody knows that. That's anecdotal. Do you not understand what that actually means? No, because you don't even understand the difference between money and currency and what they mean in terms of value to the individual. And that's kind of, well, that's the gold road, right? The yellow brick road. That's the gold, and that's sort of the rich man's path. But the rich man's path is one that we can follow. The normal everyday person, the Dorothy, the naive, innocent American can follow the path of the rich man by in our silver shoes, right?
Yeah, because that's what they were in the original book. Was they were silver slippers, not ruby. They changed it to ruby in the movie. Not sure exactly why. Some people say the red represents the blood of America that was about ready to be taken as collateral. And other
people,
and gold.
You ask the Hollywood people, and they'll tell you it's because they showed up better on the screen. That was the argument there. Yeah. But other people believe that it could have been to represent other
physical
things.
Representation of something. Yeah. Me, I have no idea. I've never really looked too much into that aspect of it, but I do know that the original shoes were silver and they were changed to ruby in the movie. So.
Yeah, And I think it's safe to just leave it at that. That's the bigger point of this conversation is the things that we can talk about that are absolute facts, and then where they're analogous to the story itself. And that's why I wanted to provide. If you go to towardanarchy.com, if you're following along, there's that introduction. Wizard of Ounces up there for somebody who wants to understand the basic political things that we're talking about here, about Dorothy, what she represents, what the silver represents. The Oz is supposed to be the ounces. That was
the representation of how they measured the gold and the silver. So.
Absolutely right.
And the Wizard of Ounces is supposed to be a representation of the banker. The wizard is the banker who controls the ounces.
And he turns your real gold and silver into fake green dollar bills, the Emerald City.
Right. And what he does is he gives, like, the Tin Man, which, if you look at the Tin Man, he's supposed to be a representation
tax identification
number. Yep, exactly. TIN, tax identification number. The Cowardly Lion was supposed to be a representation of some sort of politician from back then. I don't remember names.
Gosh, yeah, I might be able to think of it while you're telling about the rest of them.
And then, of course, the Strawman is a representation of you in the business world. That's your name in all capital letters. That's your Strawman.
William Jennings Bryan. It was William Jennings Bryan. That's who
William Jennings Bryan. Okay.
The Cowardly Lion, yeah.
Okay. I looked it up real quick, huh?
It's at this link. That's what was great about this link. I was surprised to find it. Yeah, no, it's right here. The Scarecrow, and this one they're talking a little bit differently, and this depends on who you ask. Different people have written about this at different times, but the Scarecrow is a representation of the American farmers and their troubles in the late 19th century. This is the mainstream thought of it. The Tin Man represents the industrial workers, the American steel industry, that sort of thing, and the Cowardly Lion represented William Jennings Bryan. But the point is that these things represented political things at the time.
Exactly. And with the Tin Man, your tax identification number, of course, it also represented the worker side of society because if you look at the book and the movie, the wizard gives him a clock for a heart in order to tell time so that now he can keep accurate time to be that good worker. There's just so many tie-ins in that book that that could be represented in so many different ways. Though this is just my own view, and then of course coupled with the view of several different papers that I've read or books. So
yeah, and like I said, it just depends on who you ask, and that's why I wanted to give people just a jumping off point, especially fans of the Wizard of Oz itself, who may have never heard how it connected at the time, and it's very easy to see that many people would not have heard of it. They see this fantastic, wonderful play, and they understand the story of it. They don't necessarily understand that there's symbolism, and of course, that symbolism is stretched and changed a little bit. But there's all sorts of representations about how the people are put to sleep in the poppy field, and how they're woke up by the falling snow, the pure white snow, cocaine. It just depends on who you ask and exactly what part of the story you're talking about. The man behind the curtain could be a reference to the fact that Baum worked as a window dresser. No, he worked at it's in here. I'm trying to find it. Alternative allegory. That's why I couldn't believe this was so great. I don't expect the Wikipedia to actually have some of these things. It doesn't actually talk about, and this is why you have to keep going. It doesn't mention a tax identification number. It skirts around that particular one. But it says the man behind the curtain could be a reference to automated store window displays of the sort famous at Christmas season in big city department stores. Many people watching the fancy clockwork motions of animals and mannequins thought there must be an operator behind the curtain pulling the levers to make them move. Baum was the editor. of the trade magazine read by window dressers. Okay, that's what it was. And it was something like that.
Yeah.
And that's just,
yeah,
again,
you know, I mean, and it's just, again, it just depends on your perspective and what you're thinking about when you're reading into the book, you know, and that's the same thing when they cover The Matrix and one of the other books I read, and all the representations of how The Matrix follows the same thing as The Wizard of Oz, and how, but how we're turned our society into a credit society from a cash society, you know, and
you know, I'm not as familiar with the way they attach the Matrix to that. Explain some of that.
It's more of a newer version of it, but from the little bit that I've gleaned into it, it's kind of the same thing, but just a modern version. And it basically it's how they took all the American people and put us into a worker society, and then our society, our worker society, fills the economy and fuels the money, and you know, so and fuels the credit situation. You know, keeps us all as debt slaves, basically.
Well, there's definitely the idea of slavery is at the core of the entire Matrix series, because the humans are trapped inside the cocoons by the machines, and then dumped as waste when their lifespan ends and they no longer provide the the poor claim. One of the worst claims of the movie was the electricity that the human body would produce over a lifetime of power. That was the worst part. But how exactly. You're going to say it right now. How else are you going to tie them literally sucking the lifeblood, our health and wealth out of people?
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
And but I mean, that's how they represent you away when they're done.
Out of people. Yeah, exactly what they do to us now. I mean, unless you provide for your own retirement, if you retire with nothing, you have nothing. You know, so, and you know, a lot of people, you know, they rely on, you know, they relied on the village to keep them safe when they couldn't provide for themselves anymore. You know, and now it's, you know, everybody for themselves, and again, forget everybody else. You know,
right? Well, and we've had this division driven between us, this political division, and this idea that we can democratically. And
well, that's just one of many that I've seen over the years. I used to say there was three things that divided us, and one was the political, two was race, and three was religion.
Okay.
Because those are the three things that they preach, that if you don't believe in religion, if you don't believe in what I believe in, then you're fucking an outcast, you're a freaking outcast, and you can't, you're not socially acceptable to me because you don't believe what I believe, you know? So that separates people into different religions. And then even then, you can't get people to agree on the same religion. Take Christianity, for instance. You have like probably 300 different branches of Christianity. You know, you got Baptist, Southern Baptist, and you know, you got Lutheran, and I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. It's ridiculous that all these people.
But it becomes more fractured and factionalized every year.
You know, and then and then they, of course. Yeah, and then and of course every time, every year, like you said, it just gets worse and worse. But then and then they divide us with race. You know, Black lives matter. You know, white lives matter. Like everything matters. Everybody's lives matter. It doesn't matter what race you are. But that's how they get us divided. And then recently, I added a couple more things to the list because. I added sports because, competition does have its ups, but it also separates us as well because now you have different teams and everybody has to back the team that they want, which means they're against the other people who are backing the other team. So, it's still separates.
The problem with the sports is that people put too much energy into it. They get nothing out of it. And they think, it breeds competition. It teaches people to play fairly, things like this. Well, we see that they don't. They cheat all the time. But the thing is that only works for the people who are actually participating in the sport.
Yeah,
Those
exactly.
people learn those skills, hopefully. Those people
Hopefully, yeah.
reap the rewards
Well,
of their participation in
again, though, it only
competition.
teaches them to work with a small group of people against another group of people, though. So that still,
Yeah,
even though
no,
it
at
binds
the
a
core
small
of it,
section of people together at the core, but it still separates them as a team because they have to divide themselves among other teams. So, but then, then of course, then I also added in video games recently because I play a lot of video games, and of course you know that. But the PvP, or player versus player, in video games has gotten so outrageous that people get mad and destroy their computers, destroy their PlayStations and their Xboxes because they lose a match.
that's ridiculous.
It is, and because they think that they're so much better than everybody else. Again, throwing that division that I'm better than you, so therefore we're separate. We can't ever come together as a whole, and it's just everything that they're throwing in front of us nowadays is to divide us even further. Because as that old adage goes, divided we fall. United we stand.
Right, and the problem is that this is going to be a natural thing that would happen as a society grows and continues to get huge like ours is. It gets 8 billion people on the planet or whatever. It's naturally going to faction and fractionalize off into everybody's own smaller little groups. That's the way you do it anyway. The problem becomes is when you try to have top-down control of all that, where it starts to break loose, where you start to tell these people over here that they can't be those kind of people, that they can't hang out with their own, they can't have that type of speech, that they can't grow that type of food, they can't share that way amongst their community. That's where it all breaks down, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And so
Well,
that's where
and I mean,
we
it used to be
become
that everybody knew their
anarchists.
neighbors because we were all, united.
Did
People
they?
would get
Did they?
together, communities, stuff like
Did
that.
they?
But,
Did they?
they
Or is
used
that
to.
just what they
When
told
it
us
was
on the
probably about
television?
70 years ago, 80 years ago when people did that. It's been a while, but, I mean, that's how
Yeah, I
long they've
mean,
been throwing these divisions in our face,
hey, you know what's a beautiful thing that I'm seeing right now? I watched it again this weekend because it's happening here. We're going through phases getting out of our lockdown. And
Oh, yeah, the martial law, yeah.
yes, well, the people here in
Yeah.
Topeka haven't really cared about it from day one. Everything quieted down. It's obvious at night. It's a lot quieter out at night. You can hear nature. You don't hear as much highway, and I'm right by a major artery of I-70 going through Topeka, the capital city of Kansas. So, I mean, it's not like there
Yeah.
aren't people and things going on around here, but it's gotten real quiet at night, but it's not anymore. Last night I was out again on Topeka Boulevard, took my family out for a drive. That's one of our things we like to do is go driving. And out there on the boulevard, there's this one stretch, I don't know, 5-6 blocks or something like that, where there's, I guess, business owners who don't mind that you use their parking lot space to hang out at night with your buddies, and there's just hundreds, maybe thousands of people. It's ridiculous. I've never seen it like this before. Not even last week when they first busted out and went out and did it. It's just amazing seeing all these. It's like a grassroots sort of togetherness again. And I said that at the beginning of this thing happening, is that maybe we really will come together a little bit tighter as communities and see a little bit more out of this thing. Maybe there's a silver lining to it all.
Yeah. And, and I did notice that here in Colorado as well, like not that long ago. 'Cause I live in Broomfield, which is kind of a small town. It's growing, though, and it's connecting with Westminster now.
Right.
And there's a Lowe's Hardware right up the street from me, right across the street from Walmart. And the Walmart
Hold that thought there.
parking lot.
We got to go into a break here, Bryon. Hold that thought. We'll come right back and we'll finish up here with Bryon Linzie on Toward Anarchy. TowardAnarchy.com. Look for May 17th. That is today's date. It is in my world anyway. If it's not in yours, just go to the archive. You'll see the conversation has been with Bryon Linzie, a longtime friend. And we've been talking about the Wizard of Oz and the Tin Man and the Strawman, and just catching up a little bit on our shared view of money and the world as we see things. You were just starting to say before we went into the break, you were starting to talk about the Lowe's and the Walmart down the street. I don't know where you were going.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there was same thing like with what you were saying, that there are just people parking there and just hanging out. And the whole parking lot was full, where the Walmart was empty and closed.
Very cool. No, it's great to see.
Anyway.
I hope there's something positive that comes out of the whole thing. When it's all said and done, I really do. I always do. I always hope that there's something positive.
Well, I have seen a drop in pollution citywide. Actually, in our whole state.
It's funny. It kind of is a little bit of a slap in the face to the environmentalists, sort of 100 years of progress, as we would call it, and pollution in the modern age here. And it just sort of all disappears in a matter of a couple of weeks. And it goes hand in hand with the George Carlin idea that we're just like a bad case of fleas to Mother Nature here. And when she gets tired of it, she'll just shake us off.
Yep, pretty much.
Funny.
Oh, and I was going to say, too, I wanted to kind of take a step back, because earlier I mentioned financial dictionary, and I just wanted to let your listeners know, too, that there are different dictionaries other than Webster's.
Right.
Dictionary for law, because, a lot of these words that you'll see in law have it's the same word as you'll find in the Webster's dictionary, but it'll have a completely different meaning. Same thing with a financial dictionary or anything like that. So if you ever have any questions on a definition, like when you're talking to a banker and they say something that doesn't quite make sense, you can always go look up the words in a financial dictionary, and you'll be able to understand them better than you would if you looked it up in a Webster's.
Well, that's one of the great things about my listener, is that my listener and I agree on this thing, that words matter and that you will find different.
They do.
Yeah. One of the conversations that I have on here pretty regularly is just that the importance and the difference between words and what you think the meaning of a word is versus what it actually means. Just the idea of anarchy. Everybody, the common misconception is that anarchy is synonymous with chaos, and that's not it, or that it means that you can't group together and work together with people to build a society. It's literally quite the opposite of that. It's literally what we do every single day.
Yeah, it's live free and benefit your fellow man without actually creating chaos. To me, that's anarchy. Living, free of government rule, and it's not. I live it every day. I don't file with government agencies of any kind. I don't file with any banking agencies. I don't have any bank accounts, credit cards, nothing of that sort. Just because I actually read the contracts before I sign them, and I don't agree with any contract that's been put in front of me. Even when I bought a house, first time I bought a house, I went through and I just sign here, sign date here, and and it was okay because I assumed I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing without reading the contract. And then by the time I bought my second house, I was like, wait a minute, I'm going to read this contract, and that's when I figured out that there's about 90% of that contract that I don't agree with.
Amazing what you can find out when you read what you sign. Man, it's been great getting a chance to catch up with you. It's been a while. You sound good. All is well?
Oh,
You're
yeah,
healthy?
Definitely.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
It's fine.
I'm not buying into this stupid virus scare or whatever, but,
Yeah. How's mom and dad?
The numbers just don't add up, but, mom and dad are fine. Dad is buying into the scare. Every time I talk to him,
of course,
avoid people. You don't want to get sick. It's like, hey, I'm going to treat everybody in the whole world like they have the fucking virus when it's only less than a percentage of a percentage, so
that's
whatever.
A small percentage of a percentage. How's Derek?
That I don't know. Still in jail.
Don't know. Yeah. Well, yeah. How is anybody in jail, unfortunately? Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Life of trouble. Hey, that's the state. My listener knows that conversation too. They know that.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's like once you're in that system, it's almost impossible to get out. I mean, he was out of the system for 15 years, and they put him right back into it. With the drop of a hat. It's like no problem.
Man, that's it. The music is the cue. That's the end of it. Hey, it's been great talking to you. I will catch up with you again a little bit later. You take care, Bryon.
Yep, you too, Mike. It's been great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Anytime. We'll be back on Toward Anarchy. Stick around. Coming up next Sunday on the show is another good friend, Johnny Hurley, will join me. It's the first time that I've had him as a guest on one of my shows, but it's long overdue. That's the reality of that conversation, and I kept seeing his name pop up, and he's a good friend, and he follows the show. And I just kept seeing his name pop up. And I'm like, why have I never had Johnny Hurley on the show? Why hasn't that happened? Because I respect Johnny. Johnny's a great guy. He is he's kind of one of these people that you aspire to be. He's a generally soft-spoken, good man, but he's not afraid to stand up for his rights and be down there on the sort of front line. At least doing what he believes works at the time. And there's a lot to be said about that. And there's a lot to be said about an individual's growth from doing those things to not doing those things anymore and getting on with life and doing much more important things. And so we'll have that conversation with Johnny Hurley next week on the show. TowardAnarchy.com. May 17th, I was having that conversation with Bryon Linzie, and that was fun. We kept going on that, and that's one of the things that people ask me about is, why don't you just keep them on for the whole time? Because it's just an hour out of their life. I can get people to commit to an hour. It's a pretty easy thing to do. It's just like, hey man, it's an hour. That's it. That's all you got to do. And then you're free. You go back to doing whatever you need to do with your life, and because I like to bookend this show like that, and to be able to talk about some of the other things that I find interesting. I don't do the news cycle stuff. You won't ever hear me come on and sort of do the headlines, although it wouldn't be unlike me to actually do it as a purpose, a purposeful exercise to see what everybody's mind is. It's got me wanting to do it right now. It really is. It's got me wanting to do it right now and just see what everybody is actually sort of news headlines, what's on the headlines. So I'm going to do it. Let's see. Some Republicans object to Trump's firing of State Department watchdogs. See, this is kind of fun. But you won't hear me sort of getting into these and just talking about these stories unless it's incidental to the conversation, really, that I happen to be wanting to have at the time with whoever I'm having it with. Democrats are hunting for bold ideas to meet the pandemic moment. Texas reports highest daily rate increase of infections. That's what's going to happen if you test more people. Let's see. Congress nowhere close to a coronavirus deal. No, of course not, because it's political wrangling that matters, not your health. To hell with you. Obama says U.S. lacks leadership on virus. Let me fix that for you. U.S. lacks leadership. That's that. Here, what else? What's a coronavirus headline? Incidents highest in Texas. After the coronavirus pandemic, group fitness will never be the same. A lot of things won't be. They're talking about here in Kansas about how Kansas was you've been witness to this here the whole time. Kansas was the first to close down schools and end the school year ostensibly, but not really, because they kept teaching digitally over one of the reasons we needed another camera around, another high quality camera just made for, not studio camera, but just a decent enough camera that it suits for a nice, comfortable home studio kind of thing going on. We needed another one because my wife has one now because she's been teaching from home. And they're talking about how how the classroom is going to look like in the future, and if any, what students will go back to the classrooms at this point. And I wish that I had a say, because if it were up to me, I would. This is the point that I would jump off and go to distance learning, and I realized that it's not the same thing as homeschooling, being schooled by the state in the home, but it actually solves a whole lot of the problems that are associated with the public schooling problem. You're not going to have to do the Pledge of Allegiance thing if you don't want that, if you don't want your child participating in that sort of thing. You don't have to worry about bullies, just brothers and sisters, moms and dads sometimes. Can't be helped. Oh, my wife works in such a poor neighborhood. The school district is the poorest in the district, and it's Topeka. It's a decent sized city, and man, boy, some of the tales and the stories and the fathers and no, there aren't any of those. I know it's cliche, but it's not, because it's grandpa that always picks him up, and it's a different guy this time. It's a different guy next week, and daddy's in jail, and it's just the same story over and over again. They're looking at how that's going to change, how the coronavirus will change across the board. If it were up to me, complete distance learning. They're talking about, well, you can't really do that with the younger kids, and my wife can sort of testify to this because she's teaching preschoolers, and that's too early. We've had this discussion from day one when she started working in the business, that they're too young to have them in a classroom at that point. And it's good that as a teacher, she realizes that, because then it means that her concentration is as much as she can on interacting with them on individual levels and trying to touch them. And they remember. It's pretty great. We see them in the store. It's a big city, but it's not that big. And if you shop, anywhere near that side of town, you shop. And I shop at all, because I'm looking for collectibles, and I'm looking for things that they'll have more of them at this store than they will at that store. There's Legos, and sometimes they'll have different Legos at that Walmart than they do at that one. And so I end up shopping all the stores, but you end up on that side of town, and it's that side of town. There really is a sort of, dividing line. It's Topeka Boulevard, and you will run into them, and they're always, just the biggest smiles, and they can run into her, sort of years later, and they still remember it because they're still in the same school too. So sometimes they'll see her in the hall and things like that. So it's like reinforced, but of course it's there. They know who she is, and they appreciate the individual approach, and she can see that. And it helps. It definitely helps in her presentation, but she's had to take it inside like everybody else. And that's what I would do. It would go all digital, and there's no more bullying problem. Like I was saying, there's no more bullying by the teacher at that point. Homework and everything is digital. It's online. If there's anything like that at all, it's presentation. It's there. It's there. It's all digital. One of the things that's been good about the way the public school system is run now is that so much of it is digital, and that you can do a lot of things using technology, and one of those things is keep real track time of your child's grades. And if your child is performing in the way that they should, it's definitely a tool. And I know there's a longer conversation about the public school system. We don't have to have it. The greater understanding. That's why I'm talking about this idea that right now, Kansas should be the leader in this. There's no reason why we can't. For one, it's perfect because of the fact that a lot of the population is spread out in that sense, that it's a big state with not that many people, and the larger plots and farms and things like that. People spread out into smaller country towns. All of those things come into play that make it perfect for, you can't, it's hard to draw good teachers to stay in small towns that are nearly dead. That all that's there that keeps it alive is the grain elevator and the local pub down the street, and then maybe a couple of restaurants and the one convenience store and the one small grocery store, and that's it. Everything else is, maybe they're lucky if they have a library, or maybe somebody started a museum. There's a few things along those lines. There's not much to draw you in to teach those kids, and you don't have to. And you can have less teachers. You're talking about less cost to the taxpayers because there's no more infrastructure, or there's less infrastructure. You can have less teachers teaching more people. There's so many reasons why this is the perfect time to make that shift. One, we're already going through it. And so let's just keep going. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's get rid of the old paradigm of schooling. Let's start working on something new. And by default, being in the home, the child being educated in the home and getting their education right there where their parents are at, by default, there's that opportunity. The people that are going to be involved in the education of their children are the people that are going to be involved in the education of their children, and that's it. Others are not going to be so involved. Others are going to be completely absent from the entire process. But by default, generally speaking, across the board, the parents are going to be there, the grandparents are going to be there, the brothers, the sisters. There are people around to help. There are people around to encourage. I think it's a great time. It just solves so many problems related to actually taking your child out of the home and sending them off to that public school. I know it's not the perfect home school situation. I get that, and I've had this conversation with some people. I get it. I know it's not necessarily, but you know what it is the perfect homeschool situation for? For people who can't really homeschool their children, whether they're not capable of it, they don't have the time, they don't know where to find the resources, they're not ready to dive into it, whatever it is. There are so many other ways, there's so many other tools and things that you can find, and getting people. Obviously, there were a whole bunch of people out there in the world that didn't have printers and didn't have web cameras up until about 2 months ago, because they disappeared off the shelves. You couldn't buy one online unless you spent sort of $40 for what you could get one normally for $20. And it was from China. It's unbranded, and it doesn't come with software. There's no, it's a no frills kind of situation. If you could get your hands on one at all, it took me a while. But of course, I was stubborn and didn't just immediately jump out and go grab one of the ones that was already stateside, that had come from China already, kind of situation. Ultimately is what it ended up being. Yes, I'm speaking from example. I tend to try to do that a lot. I don't try to speak for other people. I don't try to make a presentation other than my own opinion and make it clear that it's my own opinion. I talked about some fun things, and I wanted to mention one that I was surprised that it had come back, because I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, maybe, I don't know. It was this Josh Gad reunited apart. Remember I talked about it, and it was something that he had just started, and I didn't know if he would find anybody else to be on the show. Who was even on the show? Why am I all of a sudden drawing a blank? I have my little notes. So there's no script or anything like that, but I have these little notes that I jot down here. Where is it? Was it really that long ago that it was on there? Either that or I'm just not seeing it. Josh Gad, where did you go? I don't know. What was it? Well, no, I don't know. I don't know why I'm not seeing it now. It was on there. I thought I had written it down. But the new episode of it was Back to the Future. It was the second episode of it. You look for it on YouTube. That was one of the things about it. It is I've been talking about lately, is that I kept finding myself that I'd watch something on Netflix, like the Tiger King thing. I watched through all of that. My wife and I binged through all of that because it was in the pop culture. Wanted to see what it was all about. It was an entertaining show. It was very fun, interesting. voyeurism, looking in on somebody else's life. That's what a lot of television has become. And so I found myself going, well, not everybody has Netflix. I didn't even have it till that long, and I won't have it for much longer because I don't find it particularly useful. I had Prime for like 2 weeks. I didn't even ride out an entire 3 months trial on Prime. I was so disappointed in what I saw out there. No offense. I mean, it was fine, but it wasn't any different than any of the other stuff that I could find in some of the other places that I already had service, whether it was Hulu or Netflix or Disney itself. But anyway, on YouTube, where anybody can go and see some things, I decided, all right, well, I'll look for a few more interesting things along there. I'm always doing it anyway, except they're not particularly interesting enough to share. This, I thought is about Back to the Future, and they all reunited, and they all did it over Zoom. And Chris Lloyd was there, Michael J. Fox, Leah Thompson, Robert Zemeckis, the other creator, Robert Gale, guys, I don't know, something. A number of people. It was great. It was a real reunion. And then they had somebody at the end. I don't remember who it was. It was funny though, but she couldn't get connected. And they just showed her a video at the end of her sort of, are we getting connected? Are we there yet? She couldn't figure it out, whatever it was, and did her little. Just added a little commentary to it at the end of it. But it was neat because, some of these people haven't seen each other in years. And, of course, Michael J. Fox is ill. He has Parkinson's, and a pretty not a terrible case of it, I guess. I mean, maybe not any worse than he's had it for many, many years of his life. But he would take medications, and they would shoot around his inability to sort of stand still and hold on to things and stuff like that. It's interesting because I've always, when I was younger, for sure, and I had the hairstyle and everything, I guess, just long enough. I was always told that I looked a little bit like Michael J. Fox, and I find that my movements are a little bit like his too. And now after all these years of realizing why he does it, is because he can't sit still, and that's me. I can't sit still. I'm Parkinson's. I don't think it is. I don't have like good days and bad days or anything like that. I'm just a naturally bouncy sort of individual, like he was as a young person. And I understood that the comparison was a compliment, and I always appreciated it. I don't think that we look alike. I think we did when I was younger, but I think all boys, of a certain size and hair, and that's me. I'm around the same size, and I had that sort of just not long hair, but it was more hair than the other boys who had the bowl cut. The guys whose daddy did their hair for them. I at least got to go to the barber. Hey, we'll come back here. We'll wrap this thing up, and I'll tell you what's coming up next week here on Toward Anarchy. Go to towardanarchy.com, and you can find everything that we need to right there. It's in the archive. It's in the contacts. It's on the front page. It's on the listen page. If you go to the listen page, you can get to the Republic Broadcasting Network website. From there, you can get to the RBN archive website, which is an amazing website that has archives uncounted hours of amazing content across the network, across the years. It's just one of the interesting things that you can find there when you go to towardanarchy.com. But what you have to do is you have to share. You have to share this stuff, and you have to be excited, like I am, about what's coming up. And next week, it's Johnny Hurley. He's a good friend of mine for a number of years now. A real friend. Sometimes some of these people, they're virtual friends, the people that I don't really know, but that I know digitally. And Johnny's not one of those people. I know him digitally, of course, but I know him in real life. He's actual, like a flesh and blood being. He's real. He's there when you poke him. He goes, ee, like the Pillsbury Doughboy. Maybe. I don't know. I've never poked him. He'd be my guest next week, and we will have a conversation about a lot of things. We're going to catch up. It's one of these things where we haven't talked in a while. We stay connected digitally and exchange a little spat here and there about did you see this? Did you see that? And so we have some conversation pieces, some points, and things that might come up, some things that are likely to, because they're things that we end up talking about. Biorecognition tools, technology, and around decryption in general, using things like that, getting people away from passwords, stuff that I've talked about on the show. That was just one of the last things that we were talking about. And I'm like, wait a minute, whoa, stop. We can't talk about this. We have to save that for the show. Let's talk about that in front of the folks and let them see what their impression of the conversation is. And, that's what we will do next week. That's the 24th. And it's just wonderful, amazing shows. I have just a list. But again, I'm not going to do the thing that I've done before where I bounce too many of those names out there or ideas out there too quickly in case things change. I like to keep myself flexible and keep them flexible. That's one of the things about doing the 1 hour interview. It's just, here's your hour. That's it. That's what we got. Not even an interview, because I don't know. I guess every once in a while I've got my little notebook here and I'll think of a question that I'll actually write down to sort of try to remember to ask the guest, but not too often. I really don't. What did I ask for Bryon? Not a single thing that I wanted to ask him, not a specific question. But then again, that was one of those. I threw that link up there. That's one of the things you have to check out. TowardAnarchy.com, the link for today, because it was such a great show, May 17th, and that introduction to the Wizard of Ounces and some of the political theory and ideas and economic theory and ideas around the Wizard of Oz. That's it until next week when Johnny Hurley joins me. You take care. That's been Toward Anarchy.
This is RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network.